Okay, guys, it's Wayne the Future Kit talking here because while I was watching the film, there was one thing that I knew I wanted to comment on in the video, and somehow in the entire 20 odd minutes I was talking about the film, it totally slipped my mind till about 3 hours after I finished filming, and I haven't had a chance until I've gone to go and edit it all together to actually bring this up. It's a very simple thing. When Zod and his lackeys, maybe they were his lackeys, I don't know, flunkies, when Zod and his allies were taken after their sentence, the effect was the exact same thing as the fucking time scoop from the Five Doctors in Doctor Who. And I just love that. Like, this was a solid 5 years before the Five Doctors ever aired. So, yeah, I just thought that was an interesting bit of trivia. Like, seriously, this show takes over my fucking brain, I swear. And it's not the only one. Take care. Hello everyone, and welcome to the second ever movie night on Infinity Games. I'm your host Kit, and let's get started with talking about Superman 1978. So, over the years, I've heard various things about the Superman incarnation played by Christopher Reeve. And then The Flash came out a few months ago, and a lot of buzz happened around the honestly appalling decision to recreate Reeve and a version of Supergirl in CGI. And I knew then that I wanted to watch the old Superman films, but I didn't know that I'd do it for this. This series has been a very abrupt development, but obviously now we've got it, and I picked up this Blu-ray collection. It contains basically all of the live-action pre-Man of Steel Superman films. And I am going to touch a little bit on Man of Steel here, because I don't really like the film particularly. Whereas this, I'm going to be straight about it, I really, really liked this film. And one of the sentences that kept sparking into my head while I was watching the film on Friday was films from the 70s and 80s in particular, and the late 60s as well on that note. They have an authenticity to them that I don't think a lot of modern films have. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but there's a genuine nature to it, and I like that in a film. I do. This version of Kal-El definitely feels more human than, take for example, the version played by Henry Cavill. Because I actually have watched all of Snyder's DC films, and I'm not even going to hold back, I don't like them. They are overly long messes that more often than not, do not get the characters they're portraying. But not the point. So, as for plot, I will say that the film went on a bit too long, this did. Like, I appreciate all the stuff like Superman diving in to save a cat from a tree. I think that's a really neat thing to have in your film. But it did come across a bit too much, like, at times. Seeing the backstory of Superman, not necessarily something I need, because I grew up with it regularly rerunning on Boomerang on the Looney Tunes show, which there's a joke on both the first and last, I believe, episodes of the entire show, where basically Bugs tells Daffy that he's Superman, without actually saying that he's Superman. And as such, watching the backstory with a bit more detail to it was something I quite liked. Jonathan and Martha Kent, very charming. Major, because I'm quite new to a lot of the Superman stuff. The only Superman film that I think I ever bothered watching as a child was Superman Returns, and my understanding is that film was not well received. Let me just double check that I'm not talking bollocks. Okay, it was received fine, but yeah, it was a bit middling. But also, it's not like, it's not part of the same series, really. Like, what can I even really say? Like, yeah. So, I know that Reeves' Superman went on to do like 4 films. Actually, it might be 5. Let me just double check. Yeah, 4, because Supergirl didn't actually star Reeve in any capacity. Yeah, I rewind a bit. So, Jonathan and Martha Kent. As I'm not historically a major Superman fan, I like Superman. He's alright, but he's a bit boring at times. Which I do think, like, I see why there were alterations made to his demeanour in the DCEU. But I like, because of that, the biggest comparison that I had from, like, when it came to Superman was Spider-Man. Yeah, sorry, that sentence got away from me. Yeah, so Jonathan and Martha Kent are a lot like, Ben and May Parker. And right down to Jonathan basically indicates that Clark has a purpose. Ben tells Peter that great power comes with great responsibility. Those sorts of things. And it was also the last conversation both had, I believe. I must admit, I'm not familiar with Kryptonite particularly. I have a vague indication of things. Let me just pull it up. So, green kryptonite is supposed to weaken Superman. And yet, Kal-El was sent with... Well, he was sent with... Sorry. He was sent with a green crystal. It's kryptonite. It has to be kryptonite. And the film later goes through the whole, kryptonite thing. Unless I'm wrong and it wasn't kryptonite that he was sent with in his pod, because it's just weird to me that he'd be sent with kryptonite. That could be fatal to him. You know, it's a crystal sent from Krypton. So why was he sent with kryptonite? And I'm sure I'm just missing something. I was exceptionally tired while watching the film. I was trying very hard to pay attention to what was going on at the start. But I'm going to be honest, things in my flat were chaos. All sorts of noise outside. I had to open my window because it was boiling hot. And then the fucking fire alarm went off. So, ain't that nice that I went through all of that. And to be honest, I just wanted to go to bed. But I wanted to carry on with the film as well. So I made the hard choice to just carry on watching. I did hang on, let me pull things up again. So, yeah. The whole thing with Krypton being about to be destroyed, which is why Kal-El sent to Earth. That was all very interesting. Lois Lane. She's alright. I didn't feel particularly attached to her character, despite knowing the significance of Lois immediately. But I will say, as Clark Kent, Clark has absolutely no sense of boundaries whatsoever. And I'm not 100% sure why, because it's not like he's unsocialised. I'm pretty sure I couldn't hear everything that was going on in the school scene, but he spent time with people at school. But maybe I'm just looking too deep into why he's the way he is. So yeah, Lex Luthor was a delight, a little bit underplayed. Better than the one we got in Batman v Superman, I'll tell you that now, because again, Batman v Superman is not a good film in the slightest. I tried, I really did. I went in hoping that people were wrong, but they weren't. So I can't lie, it was a massive waste of my time watching that film. The only one that was even remotely competent was still bad, and that was the Snyder Cut. But that's because of the fact that the film was an overly long shambles as opposed to anything else. But yeah, so I will say, for a 2-hour film, Superman doesn't feel like 2 hours, it feels like it's longer. And that's not necessarily a good thing. But yeah, the performances in this film are great. The score by John Williams, I don't think you need to be told, is phenomenal. What I didn't like, and it's the only thing that I can say I outright didn't like, was the ending. Because it was bullshit. I'm sorry. Clark going about, like, rewinding time to prevent Lois from dying is stupid. And not really where I want to be taking the character in his first outing. That is much better saved for a film where you can explore the consequences as opposed to having it as a happy ending. So, yeah, that was ridiculous. That was stupid. Yeah. I think I've more or less covered everything. I mentioned liking how human Clark was. Getting to see his interactions. It's something that Marvel misses constantly. Because of the erasure of double lives and secret identities from the MCU, Marvel has this issue where we just don't focus on character. I can deal with a bad plot if the characters are good, is my general rule. You know, take Doctor Who for example. I've put up with all sorts of bullshit on that show. As long as the character interactions are peak, which is why the last 5 years have been so bad for me. I don't really care about any of the sci-fi stuff. In theory. I'm a bit less forgiving with Star Wars because the characters 9 times out of 10 suck ass. But like, or at least in terms of their interactions with each other. Like, if it's not Anakin and Obi-Wan or Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon or basically the Master and Apprentice bonds, I just don't care. And that's why the original trilogy is so good, because they actually interact with each other and it's fun. And they're snarky and they're funny and they're... Yeah. My point is, character interaction is everything in a film to me, or a show, or whatever, especially a show. And we will get to that someday, once I've figured out how the best way of filming it goes. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say. Double lives are good, and I want more of them in superhero films going forward if we're going to keep on doing superhero films. Frankly, I think we should stop doing superhero films and start doing superhero shows, because my understanding is My Adventures with Superman is a pretty good show. I've only seen one episode, so I can't really help. The Spectacular Spider-Man is the best superhero thing I've ever seen. But yeah, I like superhero films that basically, like, the higher the stakes get, the more ridiculous it gets. And that's what I like about this film. The stakes aren't low, but they're not high. I mean, he's not a god, he's an alien, but to us he's a god. Which is actually something I found myself contemplating quite heavily during the film. I found myself thinking about how we would probably meet an alien and think they were a god. But that's not necessarily true. Like, Clark is probably nothing compared to the rest of his people. You know, That's why I advise so heavily against what Man of Steel did with having General Zod as the first villain. Because Zod's stronger than Clark when it comes down to it. Like, from what I witnessed on Man of Steel, Zod was stronger than Kal-El. So he had to die, because he couldn't be contained. You don't do that in your first Superman film, under any circumstance, and I want that very clear. Because Superman is supposed to be... One of his core traits, from what I understand, is that he doesn't kill because he has no right. And I agree. Who is he to determine who should live and who should die? You bring that up in a sequel. It could even be the first sequel, but the first film is to set about the moral code of Superman. And there's actually a couple of scenes in this Superman film that I think accomplish that quite nicely. And those scenes are more or less like... I'm going to take one example. There was a man trying to break into a building by climbing really high and breaking in through a window. And Superman sees him, scares him, makes him fall, but he doesn't let him die. He zooms after him and catches him and delivers him safely to the nearest police officer. This is something he does quite frequently. He's not above the law, he just helps them enforce it. He makes it quicker. He could probably have done without putting a boat in the middle of the street. Which, I found that a quite neat little set piece, like, that was quite fun. But he's good. I will say, even now, like, I'm piling through the cast for the film, and the only one I recognise is Christopher Reeve. I don't make it my mission to look at all of the... I don't make it my mission to memorise cast, like, to memorise actors from an era that I don't watch nearly enough films from. Like, we're in a post-Star Wars world with this film, but not by much. But by about a year and a half, give or take. So, yeah. Apparently this wasn't the first live-action Superman thing, which I'm not surprised about, but, like, I don't really count a lot of the 40s and 50s stuff, because it's... Well, if you've ever watched a superhero flick from the 40s and 50s, they tend to be a whole other level of not brilliant. Which is fine, like, you know, I'm not expecting miracles from those times. But if I'm going to watch an old film, most of the time I stick to the confines of what was perfected in the era it was in, as opposed to the experimental stuff. That's just me. And I'm getting completely off track. So, yeah. I have heard that there was a longer cut of the film. I'm not 100% sure if the longer cut was what I watched or what, because, to be honest, my brain was so fried that I lost track of time. No, it was the 1978 theatrical. But yeah, so I have all 5 of these films, and I think that's pretty neat. So yeah, that is it for today's movie night, and I think I had more of worth to say than I did for My Sister's Keeper, because, well, that's what I get for filming as soon as I wake up, and that is why I didn't do that this weekend. I thought ending the weekend with it would be a better choice this time around. So, if you like this video and want to see more movie nights, join me next week for Friday the 13th. That's already locked in because on Friday the 13th I'm actually seeing Friday the 13th in the cinema. If you have any suggestions for movie night, you should leave them in the comments below and I will consider them at least. I try and get physical media if I'm not going to the cinema for the film, but I'm open to kind of scattering that idea. Like, if I can't get it cheap because I'm a poor student, I can get it on streaming because I have access to stuff. I'd just rather not. So, yeah. Take care of yourselves, guys, and I will see you sometime in the next week. I dare say, actually, as I'm filming this, I've already filmed tomorrow morning's Saturday morning with Kit. So, once I've edited that together and decided what the middle part's going to be there that time, yeah, we'll have a good time. We'll have a very good time. Take care.